Hey guys, today let's look at how to make a ring of fire in Blender 2.8. Maybe let me just play for you the animation really quickly. Just a preview here. Render view animation. You can see have this smoke just making that ring. And I made it short so that it can be faster for me to render, but you can see it's just following a curve object. So let's see how to set that up. So the first thing you want to do, let me just open up a new Blender project here. So we want to use a curve object to do this. So let's do that. Let me add a cube. Or faster way to do this, you can just hit F3 and type in quick smoke so that you have the materials set up for you, so that we can just focus on the smoke itself. But you need to have something like a cube or a mesh. Any mesh will do, and then hit F3 quick smoke and select that, and that should set up the materials for you, and a domain and also a smoke inflow object. If we play back, you can see that everything works right away. If you select the domain, you can see that we have a few material setups here already set up for us. Now let's work on the smoke itself. We don't need this object because we're going to use something different. And if you delete the inflow object and the smoke is still there, just select the domain and go to the domain settings and change any of the settings you have there to refresh your cache, and that should delete any of the smoke that was there. Now what we want to do is let me first get this domain here. Let's add a curve object like this. Let's rotate this 90 degrees. Let me scale it a bit and add a mesh. It's going to move it along the path like there, maybe angle it a bit, and I give it a particle system. Hit play. You can see that the particles just fall out to the ground. Now we want this to follow the curve here, so just select the curve and go to the physics tab and give it a force field. And now if we play back, yes, nothing's really happening. But if you increase the force here, it should start to push the particles. Okay, that's interesting. Shouldn't work like this. This is likely a bug, or Blender is just running out of RAM because I have this project in the background. So let me just remove that and see how things happen here, because this shouldn't happen. This must be a bug. Let me first also delete this. Because it shouldn't behave like this, and I will repeat this tutorial, but sometimes you need to show the errors, or so that if someone runs into them, they know that it's not them, it's the program itself. Yeah, so it's supposed to work something like that. This force is pushing these particles away. If you want this force to attract those particles, we would just have to change the force or the strength to a negative number, and then it should attract the particles. But we want this to follow the curve of the object. Right now our force is just a point in space, but we want these particles to be attracted along the curves, and so we can just go under the force. Remember, our object here, our curve, is also the force. If I delete this force field, you can see this is still our curve object, and if I bring it back, you can see it becomes the force. So you want to change the shape from point to curve, so that this follows the curve. Right now it's trying to, as you can see, it's bending a bit, but because of gravity, it's not able to maintain that direction. So what you have to do is increase your flow here, which will increase the strength of kind of pull the particles more towards the curve. And right now they're stopping there because our lifetime here is short. So by the time the particles get here, they're about to die, so we just have to increase the life, and those particles should be able to follow the curve, maybe even increase the velocity, because I don't think that velocity is enough, the normal velocity of the curves. Let's give it a negative value and see. Maybe our flow here is a bit too high, so let's try. So it's you have to play with the settings a bit here, so let me just use -2, maybe increase the strength of our curve here. Yeah, you can see now, yeah, the particles are following the curve. I think my life of the particle is a bit too high, so let me reduce that. Let's try 100, so that we don't have the particles making cycles around that. You can see something like that. So you have to play around with the settings a bit, and because this is a curve object, that means you can add points, and that should also influence how the particles behave. You can see now the particles follow that direction, and so how do you get the particles? Okay, I removed that project, but the way you get the particles to emit smoke, you just have this emitter, the plane emitter, give it a fluid simulation, a fluid property, and make sure it's a flow object, and under geometry you want to change to inflow, and then under flow source you want to change to particles, and select the particle system we have just created. I'm just going to change the size of these particles a bit here, so that they're easier to see. I'm just going to go under view display and reduce their size just a bit. It won't affect anything, it's just affecting how they're being displayed. Okay, I'm not sure. I think that's also a bug. You can see sometimes it stops simulating. Maybe I'm just running out of RAM. I'm not sure why, but and I don't really have anything as that big working in the background. Anyway, so now to make the particles emit smoke, you also need to have a domain object. So I'll just scale this in space like that, and then select that object and give it a fluid type domain. Then we can leave most of these as they are, and change. The other thing you need to change, you need to give this a material. Remember, we used quick smoke. We used the quick smoke shortcut, and that created a material for us, so there is no reason for us to recreate that. So I'm just going to use that, and you can see now our smoke is following that curve. Now the problem is you're going to run into is that actually that's not a big problem, maybe that's what you're trying to go for, but if you want, usually the default smoke is really fast, so what you want to do is you can play with the time scale to reduce the speed of the smoke or the speed of the simulation, or you can go under these gas settings here and play with these settings, buoyance and heat. That makes the smoke rise faster, but if you want it to be a bit slower and be more heavy, you can play around with those settings. Also, because of the length the life of our particles, we're going to be emitting a lot of smoke here as more of these particles get generated. So you can, if you don't want too much of it, you just have to reduce the lifetime to something like maybe 60, so that you don't have too much smoke emitted. When you change the particle settings, you might need to update your cache by selecting the domain and changing any of the settings in your domain, and that should update the simulation as well. So right now the simulation is stopping here because if you select our domain and go under, what is this setting called? A cache, you'll see that we are ending the simulation at around 50 frames. So let's make this 250, which is the length of our timeline, and we should be able to emit more smoke particles. Also, if you want to give the smoke a little bit of velocity, you can select, I think it's the inflow object, which is our mesh, turn on initial velocity, so that those particles, all the smoke, has some initial velocity to it. I remember when you change settings, I think this is a bug, because remember this is still a work in progress. So I've reported this bug. I guess it just haven't been fixed yet. But sometimes when you make changes, you have to go to the domain and change a setting here to update your simulation. So just keep that in mind if you're having the same issues. Now you can see we are emitting more smoke, and as more particles, okay, this is another bug as well, I think. You can see now the particles are no longer emitting. They're not dying, they're not doing anything, they're just stopping somewhere. It could be a problem with my machine, but I wasn't having any problem there on other previous projects. Maybe let me just show that instead of this one here. But basically I've talked about most of the things here that you need to know. We are emitting if you have too much smoke, just reduce the lifetime here. So just something like 10. Again, you would need to update your domain, or you can even just, if you don't want to use, because there are two different ways. I think maybe, let me see, there are 3 different ways to simulate in Blender. You can just hit play and Blender will simulate, or you can change your type from replay to final, and that will give you access to the bake button. Then you can hit that so that Blender can bake everything. So let's see how that behaves. Maybe that would clear out the error I'm having right now. Just have to give it a moment. Let's see. Okay, it's about to finish. Let's see if there are any issues left. More bugs. So I don't think this is supposed to behave like this. You can see the particles are following this path, and then they jump. Yeah, this is a bug. So let's just go back to the original project and see. Okay, this is a different one. I see. I can't even remember. I'm not even sure if I was saving that. So yeah, okay, so it's here. Yeah, and you could, so if you want to simulate smoke and fire, you need to select the domain and go to domain. Okay, I would have to free this, which I don't want to do. You would have to go to domain, and there is a setting to simulate smoke and fire. Actually, it's not the domain, it's the emitter itself. Your inflow object has that setting. known to your emitter. So let me just select that. So under flow type, you have the option to choose fire and smoke, and in your render settings you will not be able to see the fire unless you select the domain and add in this gradient setup. So you can pause for a second to see what I mean here. So you just add an attribute. Let me first disconnect this for you so that you can see what I mean. So without these nodes, this is what you get in your render preview. To get the fire, what you want to do is add an attribute for node. So you find it under input attribute, and I want to type in the name flame. And just copy that. Everything is lowercase. Now if you feed this directly into the emission strength, that also can, and the reason we're not seeing anything is because my emission color here is set to black. So if I bring that up, I should be able to see something. Let's see if we add a color ramp. Convert. Oh, I'm not sure why it's not working. Let's see. Let's just use this node setup and see. Have this for color. We have this for emission color, and this was interesting. Anyway, just go back to where everything was working. I'm not repeating this tutorial. So thank you for watching. I'll see you.